Closer. Welcome to more Britain's Hidden History. And this time I'm reading from the Trojan War 650 BC by Wilson and Blackett. I get a lot of requests just to read out some passages. I hope somebody play them in the car so we go to bed with them. And this is called the Chronology of the Ancient World, and it really talks about the outrage of just ignoring all of British history and the records and what they can actually add. So I better crack on because it's quite a long one. If anyone were to set out to try to examine the ancient chronology of the nations, they surely would think it might be a reasonably good idea to look at the histories of a nation which is provably 4,000 years old and which has been in continuous occupation of its present territories for the periods of 3,600 years and for 2,500 years, following two recorded migrations. The sane answer to this question would be yes, for such a nation with a continuous recorded history would probably have a considerable contribution to make in the matter of chronology. Sanity, however, does not prevail in Britain, where the so-called United Kingdom has for many centuries been riven by regional jealousies, and histories have long been nothing more than a political football. In AD 1400, Henry IV of England prohibited the possession, the use of, and the importation of any and all writing materials in Wales. In 1474, when William Caxton set up his printing press in London, care was taken to legislate that printing would be made illegal in Wales. This deplorable prohibition remained in force until 1694, by which time the damage had been well and truly done. Sadly, a culture of denigration developed as a result of misconception and tunnel vision. By roughly 1800, the English universities began to convince themselves that there were no Cymric records and manuscripts, as their ancestors had made targets for destruction of the Cymric universities, colleges, monasteries and churches for 1,300 years. This belief might have appeared to be justified. So, they constructed a theoretical and highly imaginative ancient history of Britain. In doing this, they had the colossal advantage of near total ignorance, having legislated the correct records into hiding and secrecy for centuries. Anyone wishing to study ancient Greek history usually has to learn Greek, and students of Roman history usually learn Latin. To study the ancient history of Britain, an academic would need to know the language, but no self-respecting English academic would bother to learn the ancient British language of Cymric Welsh. It was unthinkable that the imaginative version of theoretical history dreamed up in Oxford and Cambridge could be wrong, when the ancient British text constantly contradicted these invented nonsenses. The fact that ancient Greek and Roman sources supported these British records was simply ignored. Thus it was that this veritable goldmine or treasure chest of valuable ancient historical evidence had to be completely suppressed. The advanced culture of the British was so admired by Strabo and commented on by Caesar around 60 to 50 BC had to be smeared as primitive and barbaric, and British accomplishment and victories needed to be obliterated or turned into defeats. Finally, the whole of the entire history was attacked on the basis that it included the true story of the second migration coming to Britain from Trojan Asia Minor. The city of Troy was declared to be a poetic fiction, and therefore all ancient British history can be discarded as fictional. No positive work of any kind whatsoever was ever done in any British university to examine the truthfulness of ancient British history. This is why the ancient British alphabet had to be destroyed and declared to be a forgery of around 1800. At no time is anything recorded in a positive light, and any investigation that begins to reveal the truth results in what can only be described as persecution. The political indoctrination is the ludicrous idea that all English Anglo-Saxons and nothing that is British is of any importance before the advent of the Anglo-Saxons around 450, and immigration later developed on a large scale after AD 562, when Britain was devastated by debris from a comet that destroyed most of the country and the majority of the population. Academics write that South Wales went into decline, and it is reasonable to compare Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan as going into decline after being struck with atomic bombs in 1945. The simple idea that the ancient British people of the El Cicanis, or the Old Syrians, did migrate in fleets from Chaldea, Syria, around 1600 BC, as recorded in the histories, was definitely a prohibited zone of research. The equally simple idea that there had been a Trojan War at the city of Troy around 6050 BC, and that a great-grandson of Aeneas of Troy, who was named Bruth, or Brutus, had sailed a great fleet to Britain, is also a very dangerous area of research. In 1876, discovery of Troy by Heinrich Schliemann has done nothing to alter the entrenched dogma that the city of Troy never existed outside the imagination of the Greek poet Melesigenes or Homer, and therefore any British history, including a migration from Troy, is automatically a fiction. All that needs to be done is to take the ancient British alphabets and the ciphers, which were preserved by the bard Llewellyn Shon around 1540, and to translate the ancient, officially non-existent, inscriptions in Wales, Scotland and England. Then the vast multitude of inscriptions in the same alphabet can be deciphered in Italian Etruria, back to around 650 BC, and also in ancient Swiss Erasure. It is possible to move backwards along the allegedly fictional migration trail through Italy to the Aegean and on to Asia Minor, where there are even more rock-cut or inscribed stone inscriptions dating back to 650 BC. All in the same identical British alphabet, allegedly forged around 1800 according to the establishment, all of which can be deciphered and translated using the same ciphers and the same ancient preserved British Cymric language. The fact is that the archives of the ancient Assyrian emperors of between 740 and 620 BC were found at Nineveh in 1846 by Austin Layard, where the Assyrians recorded the name of the Cymry nation. The fact that some of the 25,000 baked clay tablets appear to carry the same ancient alphabet is another embarrassment that has been conveniently ignored. These ancient tablets are in the British Museum in London, and so they are, unfortunately, inaccessible. It is ironic that this discovery, made in Iran in 1846, coincided with the 1846 fake Blue Book report, which allowed for the seizure of the entire Cymric Welsh educational system. The trail leads back to ancient Palestine, and the evidence points directly towards Egypt. This is why the ancient Cymric triad of the stones of Gwyddion Gehebnon, upon which all the knowledge of the world is written, has to be taken seriously. The allegation that the British are the only nation on the planet Earth to have created a vast, complex, forged history when no actual history ever existed is an outrage. Consider this absurd proposition that several thousand historians, monks and bards, living over an area of 1,500 years and spread over thousands of square miles of country, all conspired to produce a huge, precisely interlocking, detailed, totally forged history, that they then very carefully backed up this monumental forgery with hundreds of ancient inscribed stones, hundreds of large named burial mounds, stone coffins with skeletons, several hundred ancient fortresses, all positioned in a strategic pattern, castles, manors, countless ancient churches, and even ancient roads, is quite untenable. This is what the public are invited to believe. It took just 3 dictionaries, a few photographs of ancient hieroglyphics texts, and a few sheets of paper and some pens to test the validity of the implied ancient British historical claim that the Egyptian hieroglyphs could be read as written in the British Cymric language. This test lasted for all of an hour, and maybe 2. Therefore, given the time and expense involved, it is astonishing that no one else has ever attempted to carry out this experiment. This work was just as straightforward and equally as time-efficient as the trials to decipher and translate the allegedly indecipherable Etruscan and the misnamed as Asian Pelasgian. The fact that the ancient British Culbran alphabet, which was described by Julius Caesar and by Ammianus Marcellinus, and which still exists on stones and artifacts going back to around 800 BC, is universally omitted from all the catalogues which claim to include all the alphabets of the ancient world, raises questions which need to be answered, no matter how embarrassing this is for university employees. The situation is perhaps symptomatic of the strange mentality and the inferiority complex which for centuries allowed large numbers of British warships to be named after alien and foreign ancient Greek and Roman heroes and deities. Why not name British warships after Chinese emperors or Mongolian Khans or whoever? Ancient British history is sound and as solid as any other ancient history, and from results achieved so far it is more accurate than most. It holds the keys to unlock the secrets of the past, and it needs to be respected as the treasure that it is. Perhaps it is time for everyone to decide whether or not they are British. There you go. More from Wilson and Blackett soon. Till the next time, Heddwch.